Sometimes when I think I'm going to a place to talk about one thing, if you listen, if you pay attention, other things will crop up as well. So this guy, Rendell Sam, I started telling him about my peace project, and he rolled up his pant leg and he had a big peace sign tattooed on his leg. And he said, I think we're supposed to talk. I said, all right, let's talk. I said, how much time do you have? He said, I got about 10 minutes. And I said, ooh, might take more than that. But I set up my equipment and we talked for an hour and a half because Rendell was really excited to talk about his journey to recovery. That he had spent 30 years addicted to alcohol, that he'd been addicted to opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing him a lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing him a lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing him a lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing him a lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing. Yeah, that was my very first exhibit at Fergus Falls. Did you see it? Oh my! He might have been went to that exhibit in Fergus Falls. Yeah, that was my very first one. It was so excellent. I just couldn't. Lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing. Yeah, that was my very first exhibit at Fergus Falls. Did you see it? There are problems in the world, and there are. He might have been went to that exhibit in Fergus Falls. Yeah, that was my very first one. It was so excellent. I just no one's gonna show up. Lifeline. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing. Yeah, that was my very first exhibit at Fergus Falls. Did you see it? There are problems in the world, and there are. He might have been went to that exhibit in Fergus Falls. Yeah, that was my very first one. It was so excellent. I just no one's gonna show up. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing. Yeah, that was my very first exhibit at Fergus Falls. Did you see it? There are problems in the world, and there are. He might have been went to that exhibit in Fergus Falls. Yeah, that was my very first one. It was so excellent. I just no one's gonna show up. Like they kept offering him, maybe you can get help here, maybe you can get help there. But he was never ready to grab it. But then one day, opioids for a few years, which has been devastating his community and so many others across the country. And he said that people kept throwing. Yeah, that was my very first exhibit at Fergus Falls. Did you see it? When I went out, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people out on the street sweeping up broken glass and boarding up buildings and making sure people had the food that they needed. And I think for me, when you see something on the news, I think it's important to always ask what else is true. Right? Both of those things can be true. And there's a tension in that, but there's also a richness in that, in understanding that complexity. So I'll sometimes share out these studio series in a video at a conference or something like that, but we couldn't do that because of COVID. So I found this church that was just north of the intersection, and it had that big blank wall up there. And I said, any chance I can project some images on the side of that? And they said yes. So every night for 10 nights at the end of that summer, we projected them 20 feet by 30 feet. Just as a way to say to the community, I see you, I hear you, and you matter. I think it's one of the most powerful things we can do for one another, and it costs us almost nothing.
Was it the same image each night, or did you shuffle through?
There were 50 of them that would scroll through. And so we'd play it for about an hour each night at dusk so that people could see them scroll through. We'd leave them up for about 15 seconds, which is long enough for people to read them. We've done this in other places. We went to a place called Art Prize in Grand Rapids, Michigan, big arts festival, and we asked people there, when have you found unexpected courage? This woman said, at the height of the abuse I endured, I suddenly found my voice. We do other community art projects where we'll print out their things and put them in a gallery so that they can sort of celebrate one another. This is what we did up in New York Mills. They had these grain elevators on the side of town. We asked in New York Mills, when have you felt a sense of belonging? And this guy said, in the 9th grade, even with my autism, I found it wasn't hard to be welcomed with open arms. It was a new experience. It was a new place. I've always been tall, but for once I felt that way. I thought that was sweet. And this woman said, you don't realize you belong until you don't. So this was in December, and I think it was about 8 degrees outside, but we had done 150 people's portraits in town, and everybody came out to see themselves projected on the side of the grain bin, which was pretty fun. I'd never projected on the side of a round thing before. That was interesting. And then this is a church in Minneapolis that wanted to reflect the neighborhood they were in. So we printed these banners 12 feet high and put them on the outside of the church. So trying to find different ways to use this art and storytelling to connect people, to get people to show up, to get people to feel like they're part of the bigger whole. A couple more examples. We worked with veterans around PTSD and suicide prevention, and we just asked them, what have you learned? Someone said, trauma doesn't define you. You may feel lost and alone, but you're not broken. If you're alive, hope lives, and healing can follow. Brian's suicide didn't stop his pain. It just gave a piece of it to everyone who knew and loved him. And Joe said, if suicide seems like the only answer, then you're asking the wrong question. I've learned to enjoy life again. And I'm not a vet, but I sort of have a heart for some of the things we've asked vets to do and the way that they've become broken and the way we just sort of push them aside once that happens. And so this is a 5-day retreat. And at the beginning, I explained what I was trying to do. And Joe's a lot bigger than me. And he came up to me after my talk, and he stood right about here. And he said, I don't know what sort of art craft you're trying to do, but I don't want anything to do with it. And I said, okay, but if you change your mind, I'll be here. And on the last hour of the last day, he showed up. And when I shared these back to the community, he came and gave me a hug that I thought was going to crush me. And he just said, thanks for listening to our stories. I think there is a lot of good that can ripple out when people feel heard and when people feel valued. And there's a lot of tough stuff that ripples out when they feel pushed to the side. So that's become a part of our process, is just to hear people wherever they're at. We worked with people who were unhoused out on the West Coast and asked, what do you want the world to understand? Remember times that preconceptions were wrong. There are times I've been certain I knew the answer, and then I learned a new truth. When people are tired and worn down, it's hard to move on and see the next steps. I'm changing my life. I'm starting to love myself again. This guy had been watching us from the edge of the parking lot where we were doing these photos for most of the day. And I finally said, do you want to come and do this? And he said, I have something to say, but I don't want my picture taken, so I'll pass. And I'm like, well, let's think about this. What else could we do? And finally he goes, can I do this? I'm like, if that's how you want to show up, then yeah, you can do that. So we try to make a space where people can feel comfortable sharing and participating however they want to. And finally, Zach said, we're all going to make it. And Zach said he was living at a tent camp when COVID started, and he said every day he would walk around and everybody he saw, he would say, "We're going to be all right. We're going to make it. Things will be fine." And he said finally he figured out he was maybe trying to convince himself. How are we doing time wise? Oh, we're okay. Um, so we go to these really hard places, but we go there with the belief that there's beauty and wisdom in it, that we can find something good and we can learn something. And so again, we went to the border, and when we were there, this is on the south side of the border. This is in Mexico, Nogales, Mexico, and this is Pancho, who's a street nurse. And Pancho, he's in that. Pancho is trained as an EMT. He was able to get an ambulance donated. And so he's got the skills to help people. He circulates south of the border looking for asylum seekers who are in medical crisis, people who don't have much for resources and they're not doing okay. And he's got the ability to help them out. If they're in diabetic crisis or respiratory something, he can help them out. And he said he realized that he wasn't trying to change their life and he wasn't trying to change the policies. He just wanted to change people's moments. And I think when we look at some of the issues in the world and they feel so big and it feels like maybe the solutions I bring to the table can't really impact what's going on, maybe there's something I can do to at least change somebody's moment and change in that little exchange that we have. This was again down in Skid Row, 8,000 people living on about 55 city blocks in Los Angeles, and I love this little bit of graffiti. It's not how you fell down; it's how you get back up. We kept going up the coast. We wound up in Corvallis, where I met Kate Adair, who had lived on the streets for a long time. And during her interview, Kate said that sometimes it wasn't just finding shelter or food that was the biggest challenge, but it was knowing how other people were looking at her, and that judgment that she received during the day. That was some of the hardest stuff. She lived for a long time under a bridge. And when I interviewed her, she said she just really wanted a place where she could lock the door, where she could take a bath, and where she could cook a meal for her friends. And this doesn't always happen. So I interviewed her probably in 2022. Just last spring, I was in Oregon again. I was at what's the name of it? Willamette University. It's just south of Portland a little bit. And I was getting ready to do a public talk at the end of the thing, and Kate came in. She had somehow, I had lost track of her. I didn't know how to send her a note to let her know I would be out there, but somebody let her know, drove her up there so she could come in, and she had a big smile. Oh, I get emotional. She came in with a big smile, and she said, "Guess what?" I'm like, "I don't know. Do you have a door that locks?" She goes, "Yep." She goes, "And I got a bathtub in my place." She said, "And last night I cooked a dinner for my friends in my own kitchen." So things change, right? Sometimes it feels like these things are hard and they're never going to shift, but things change. Oh no, what's this guy? Oh, good, he wrote his name. Simranjit Singh. I have a lot of names in my head. Simranjit Singh is Sikh. Um, a lot of people confuse Sikh. Actually, I think the right pronunciation is Sikh, but I feel weird saying Sikh. But a lot of people confuse the Sikh community with being Muslim. And he said when he was growing up, especially after 9/11, he lived in New York. He said their family got death threats. They got, people beating on their doors, a lot of really angry phone calls and stuff like that. And he said that was really hard as a kid. He said, but what also was true is that all of the people in their neighborhood that knew them would call them up and say, "Hey, we're going to the grocery store. Can we get you anything? Let's make sure you got everything you need so you don't have to go out. It's a really tough time for you to be out." And he said he remembers his dad saying to him that there's a lot of ugly in the world, but there is always, always more beauty in the world as well. And that's what he tries to hold on to when things get hard. I think two more stories here, and then we'll take some time for questions. We doing all right time-wise?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
if you want to stay as long as you want.
Oh, I'll visit as long as people want to. He's a I I love the mountains and the ocean, which does not explain why at the end of this 2.5 year road trip we settled back in Minnesota. Um, but this is where our people are. This is where all of our connections are. So we love the state. But I was excited. I got to meet Lori Schneider, who's a mountain climber, and she's climbed the tallest mountain in every continent, all while diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Well, the first one, she hadn't been diagnosed yet. She climbed to the top of it. She sort of set this goal, and then she got diagnosed, and she thought, well, there goes that dream. Never going to be able to do that. But she thought, well, wait a minute, maybe. And she had the kind of MS that would go into remission every once in a while. So every time it would go into remission, she'd climb another mountain. Then it'd flare up and she'd pause. Went into remission, she'd climb another mountain. The last one she climbed was Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, 29,035 feet. And she couldn't wait to see the view from the very top of the world. So she got there, she made it all the way to the top. Um, as she got to the top, the clouds rolled in and she couldn't even see her hand in front of her face. She's like, shoot. She said, okay, but I've got my sack phone. I'm going to call my family back home and I'm going to celebrate with them. And she dialed them up and it rang and it rang and it rang and it rolled into voicemail. She's like, seriously? So, and a storm was coming, so she had to get down. And on her way down, she was a little disappointed at first, but on her way down, she realized that she hadn't climbed the mountain to see the view and she hadn't climbed it to call her family. She climbed it to prove to herself what she could still think. You know, sometimes our goals look a little different than we think they're going to look. She she's about 5'2" and about 105 pounds, and she said sometimes she'll get on these expeditions with these alpha males who look at her like she's going to be a liability. Right? Who is this small person? Who is this woman? She's got MS, for crying out loud. She's going to make it harder for me to get up. So she made a decision from the start that she was not only going to get herself to the top, she was going to carry one piece of their gear up to the top too. So she's kind of badass. um, and then this last story. This was from Charleston, South Carolina. Um, we went there to talk about some of the historical ramifications of slavery and the way that still ripples out. Charleston was the site of Gadsden's Wharf, where more than 60% of the people who were brought into the United States to be slaves came ashore. Um, that has now been turned into a museum that talks about the history and legacy of slavery and also includes a genealogy center so that people can track their roots and see where it is they've come from. So they've sort of reclaimed this really ugly piece of land for something a little bit more productive. But when I was there, we went to Mother Emanuel Church. And you remember in 2015, it was on a Wednesday night, all black historic church. White supremacist Dylan Roof walked up and asked if he could come into Bible study on Wednesday night. And they welcomed him in. They're like, yeah, come on in. Everybody's welcome here. And he sat with them in the basement of the church for an hour while they talked about the Word of God. And when everybody bowed their heads to pray at the end, he pulled out a gun and he shot and he killed 9 people. And, just a tragic, horrific event, which by the next evening, the members of the community were coming out publicly on the news forgiving him for what he had done. Boggled my mind that they could get from tragedy to forgiveness quite that quickly, but they did. When I was there, I got to interview Lee Bennett, who's one of the church historians for Mother Emanuel. And I arrive early everywhere I go. I arrived early this morning, and I don't like people to wait for me, but that means oftentimes I'm waiting for people who arrive on time, like they should. So Lee arrived on time, as he should have, but while I was waiting, I was hanging out by these doors up here. And here I am, a middle-aged white guy from up north, with bags of equipment, who knows what's inside, asking to be let in. asking if I could come inside. That has not worked out well for them in the past. And so I didn't lead with this question, but I really was curious to ask Lee at some point in the interview. I said, Lee, how is it that a person who looks like you can come to trust a person who looks like me after having that trust violated in such a horrific way? And he said, well, that's easy, John. He said, this isn't our house. He said, this is the Lord's house, and we're here to serve and welcome and love everybody who walks through that door. And he said furthermore, he said, whatever your religious tradition is or not, he said, we can't allow the bad acts of one person to change who we are as human beings. I thought, oh, what if we could take that kind of grace and wash it out across the country, wash it out around the world? What would that look like? So for me, each of these stories is a little point of light, right? For me, I mean, none of these things is going to solve the world, but each of these is an example of how we might be able to live better together, how we might find a way through a difficult moment, how we might be a little bit kinder to somebody. And I mean, for me, Dr. King left us a lot of really powerful words, but one of my favorite quotes, maybe you know it, is that hatred can't drive out hatred. Only what? Love can do that. And darkness can't drive out darkness. Only what? Light can do that. And the more I work on this project, the more I meet people like this, the more I go into places where I don't belong and get welcomed in, the more I understand that it's you and I who are the love, and that it's you and I who are the light. We got a lot of work to do. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You already have your hand up for a question?
Well, it's not a question. It's a Christmas card that the Quakers sent out, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And it says, love thy neighbor. Then underneath it says, no exceptions in parentheses.
Yeah, you know, I'm a faith-based person. ELCA Lutheran is my tradition, although I wind up in a lot of churches. But I'm not a theologian, and I can't really quote you scripture. I can barely remember the 10 Commandments, but I think I have the gist of it. But I am drawn to that call to love one another. And I've looked for the loopholes and I've looked for the exceptions. It doesn't say love the ones that look like you. It doesn't say love the ones that live like you. It doesn't say love the ones that voted like you in the last election cycle. That's a tough one for me sometimes. But it says love one another, period. And that's sort of where this project begins. What does that look like in the world today? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your books that year?
Yeah. We have 4 books. One of them is out of print right now. But this first book was done in Minnesota. These are all Minnesota stories. And really, my voice is removed from this. It's just the interview. It's a little portrait of the person. I feel like it's story time now. It's a portrait of the person. It's a little biography about who they are, and then an excerpt from their interview.
Recognize that name, Al Queen.
Oh yeah, that is Al Queen. Yeah, Al Queen's grandson played in the same basketball league that my son played in, and I knew Al Queen's son, who was a pastor. And so I'm like, hey, any chance your dad would do this? And he said yes. So most of the people in the book, you won't know their names, and that's kind of intentional. But if you have a chance to sit with Al Queen, why not? This one was published by Broadleaf Books in Minneapolis. It's a little bit more narrative, and it's really my story about how this project developed, sort of how I took it. It's an extended version of what I talked about today. That talks about sort of the methodology and the inspiration and how we were sort of scrappy about making it work. And then this one is the most recent one, Lessons on the Road to Peace. Remind me to never self-publish a 304-page, 3.5-pound book again. It's when we self-published it, when it showed up on a semi-truck to deliver the 4,000 copies, it was 17,000 pounds of books. So I had friends who helped me unload it. They're still my friends, luckily. But this is really a journal of her 2.5 years on the road. living in the van. The people who we met along the way, some of the places that we went, some of the things we experienced. As a part of that, it won the Minnesota Book Awards last year for Best Book of Nonfiction. So we've got all of those up here. We've also got stickers with the website. We post all of our new stories online. Also as podcasts, if you want to listen to the people tell their story in their own voice. These little coins also have the website. You can grab one of those. And this little brochure talks a little bit about the community engagement work that we do around the country. We are now a 501c3. So we flipped it. It used to be just an art project, but we flipped it to a nonprofit in 2020 when the pandemic made everything else go away. There are people who believe in the power of storytelling. These folks make it possible for us to do our work. So with my exhibits and my lectures and stuff like that, those are all basically fee for service. So we get revenue for the project. But when, like this summer, we went to Northern Ireland for a few weeks to gather stories about how they moved through their sectarian violence. We just came from Louisiana, where we were doing stories about climate change around the 20th anniversary of Katrina and Rita that devastated the place down there. There's no revenue attached to that. That's all supported by our donors who want to keep us on the road. So, yeah.
Well, John, again, thank you for coming. So I was running around trying to get the stream up, and I got the.
Did you get it?
Yes, I did. So it is streaming out. So yes, so we are streaming out. So I don't know if you discussed this, if when you decided to make this decision with your wife for a personal journey and this project. I mean, I think we talked about before you, when you got here, what your personal background was, but I don't think we got into it, like your educational background and how you kind of arrived at the point to where you're going to make a book such as this. So can you talk about your educational background and kind of your career from how you've managed to get to that point?
Yeah. I went to college at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Are you a Blue Gold? Nice. I got to give the commencement address this year at Eau Claire, so that was kind of fun. They gave me one of their distinguished alumni awards, and then that was the biggest crowd I ever stood in front of. That was pretty fun.
Mine was Tommy Thompson, and he was the head of HSS, and he opened up the stage.
Oh, you did. Somebody booed me off the stage. But I got my degree in journalism, in writing, actually, although I had more classes in photography than I did in writing. They just didn't have a photo degree. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I worked for a couple of years at a small daily paper in Wisconsin, Manitowoc, Wisconsin, right on Lake Michigan. Why are you chuckling?
Stephen Avery.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so did that for a little while, moved to Minneapolis because of my wife's job, and I started working at commercial studios, doing a lot of product work, a lot of catalog photography. Horrible and mind-numbing, but it taught me about lighting and taught me about how to run a business. And then when my first child, 4 months before my first kid was born, and 4 months after we bought our first house, I quit my paying job to be a freelance photographer. Thrilled my parents, of course, but we managed to make it work. And so I shot for 20 years for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies, did a lot of travel photography. And when that business started crashing during the recession in 2009, I started working on a piece of my mind, which had no potential for revenue, but was keeping me sane. Like it gave me some purpose to focus on. And then very slowly over time figured out how we could do programming, how we could do exhibits, how we could produce books. And now it's all that I do. So it's, I don't think anyone's ever going to hand you a job like this. You got to go and make it. So I feel really lucky that we found a way to make this work. Yeah.
What camera do you use? Do you have your own software for editing things like that?
Oh, yeah, nuts and bolts. I shoot with Canon 5D Mark IVs. I've got a couple of them. I shoot a little bit of video. I have a drone that is currently in a swamp in Louisiana because I was too scared to go retrieve it from all of the alligators. I crashed it down there, and I did borrow a canoe from a guy named T. Irv at a marina to paddle out there. And when I was walking through the grass, I knew the drone was right there, about 50 yards in. When I was walking through the grass up to here in this much water, and I was hitting it with my paddle to make sure it was okay, and that felt all right. When I got to the grass up to here, and I hit it with my paddle, and something went. I'm like,
You're like,
nah, I'm giving up. I'm giving up. I'm not really a gear guy. I mean, I edit with Photoshop. I don't do much to it. I'll just adjust brightness and contrast. I don't. If someone's got a wild ear hair coming out of the side, I'll retouch that. But I don't really give people more hair or remove 20 pounds. I tell people this is a come as you are proposition, and folks are beautiful just the way they are, and so we photograph them like that. Yeah, I record audio into GarageBand, and I cut my videos in iMovie, so it's all really pretty straightforward consumer level stuff. This summer, I had the good luck of having 3 summer interns from Willamette University. Usually, I just do this as a solo show, but I'm understanding that I'm not an old guy, but I'm not the youngest guy either. And as we grow the project, I want to make sure to build a team so that this methodology and this process can live beyond my working life. So training up the next generation of storytellers.
And do you know, I can't remember his first name, but the guy from Ely Broadbent who did Chased by the Light?
Brandenburg. Jim Brandenburg. Yeah.
The game, not the actor.
Yeah. I know his work, certainly. I've not met him, but his stuff is beautiful. Yeah.
We just lost him about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. He just died.
He died.
Very recently.
Oh, I had heard that.
6 months ago, within the last year. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Chased by the Light, where he shot 1 frame a day for
90 days.
For 90 days, yeah. I did a project modeled after him a little bit. It's gotten no public attention, but I haven't tried. When we came back off of the road, I decided to walk for 40 days in a row at sunrise, walk through the sunrise, and it was from Easter the 40 days forward, so I got to watch it sort of full picture till full summer. And it was just an exercise after being on the road and trying to find that beauty in such far-flung places to remember it's good.
Or just being here.
And I would. Okay.
It's us. As Albert Surrender was.
Yeah, they're right there.
That was done on an iPhone.
Wasn't the first one done on film?
Yes, the first one.
I think the first one was done on film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really old camp.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous book. Yeah, but I think he did move to iPhone from then. A lot of my stuff, the cover of my book was shot on my iPhone. They're amazing. And it's way lighter to carry than the 40 pounds of gear that I usually carry.
Yeah, in all honesty, I've heard that the cameras on our phones are just as good as any DSLR.
Yeah, you don't have as much control over depth of field and focus and things like that, but yeah, they're great quality. What else do we have for questions? By the way, it was my wife's idea to sell the house. It didn't take me long to say yes, and it was also my wife's idea to. We started in a trailer, a 34-foot trailer, which seemed like a pretty significant downsize from a 2,800 square foot split level. But that trailer broke when we were on the road about a year into it. The frame broke. Basically, one of the axles separated from the trailer. Luckily, at 2 miles an hour, as we were pulling into a campsite and not at 70 miles an hour going through San Francisco earlier that day. But it took them, we knew it was going to take them forever to repair it. It was still under warranty, but we came and lived in our friend's basement for a month while we figured out what was next. And it was Karen's idea to downsize into the van. Also a great idea. Didn't take me long to say yes. So.
It reminds me of Nomadland.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just met one of the guys who was the location scout for Nomadland, and he helped identify some of the people who were in the movie. So yeah, good movie. That person, the main character in Nomadland, that wasn't really a choice. She was just in a difficult economic situation. But when you're on the road like this, you see a lot. I mean, there are a lot of variations, right? There are retired people who have their $250,000 rig, who are just out seeing the world. There are young folks who are just on an adventure, and there are people who are one breakdown away from being destitute. We were somewhere in the middle of all of those things, but it's interesting when you get out of the normal pace of life. There's a lot of ways that you see that people are living out in the world. What else do we got?
So I have a granddaughter who just graduated from U of M with a degree in art and journalism. And I don't know how much photography, but she has applied for a job, doesn't have one yet. But I'm just wondering, this sounds like a wonderful opportunity for an internship if I can have her contact you.
Have her contact me. Yeah, grab my stuff, because I just lost 3 amazing interns, and I'm a little sad, and I'm wondering who's going to help me next. Have her reach out. Yeah. The website has all of my contact info. This also has my phone number on it. She can text or whatever. What's her name?
Her name is Madeline Taylor. Schiller. Yeah, Madeline Schiller.
Yeah, have her send a note. So, anything else? Yeah.
What in your professional career would you say was your peak experience? Like it doesn't get better than that. And don't say standing up there in front of the set of
That okay, I won't say that. I mean, I always say the next interview is my favorite. Whatever's next. I have to say this whole summer and the way it unfolded, and getting to spend 3.5 weeks in Northern Ireland, then getting to go down to Louisiana to talk about climate change, that was magical. And having the help of 3 amazing interns. I am learning how to work with a team. I used to believe that I was the only one who could do this, and so I really held on to control very tightly. But this summer, realizing that when you surround yourself with smart people, that they can do good things and the project as a whole becomes better, that has so far been my peak experience. Yeah, learning how to let go and play this thing beyond just feels like a treat.
So in Ireland, and I don't know that later on, it was after that you heard about climate change, but did you discuss climate and some of those issues in Ireland? I'm just wondering other countries, view of maybe our attitude towards the climate, or if that was even brought up.
Yeah, I mean, Ireland's view of a lot of things we're doing in the United States right now are pretty skeptical and pretty incredulous. That being said, I think that the Irish people and most people I've met around the world are really good about separating American politics from American people. So although they might be horrified by what they see about our politics, they treated us really well. When we were there, Ireland had a heat wave like they'd never seen before. And they're like, are you not seeing this? Are you not understanding what's going on in the world? And they're making some strides in their solar and their wind, and they're trying to disconnect from some fossil fuels and things like that. They're disappointed that with our economic power over here, that we're not being better leaders. The focus of our conversations were really about their political mess and the way that they've navigated some of their sectarian violence. But in the small little, small talk before and after the interviews, that stuff was all on the table. Yeah. What else?
This has been a very positive presentation, so very life affirming. Does it get hard at times to stay positive? And is there any? I mean, because I have a hard time staying positive too. But even though I want to lead with positivity, but does it get hard sometimes to just with everything going on in the world, to just like want to lash out, maybe write an angry Facebook post or tweet? Does that happen sometimes?
I have learned the skill of pausing and taking a breath before I press send on any of my social media things, running it by some of my people and saying, does this seem fair? Does this seem okay? And actually, even one step beyond that. So if I'm going to say something about Israel, if I'm going to say something about the Middle East, I have friends who I've interviewed who are rabbis. I have friends who are imams. I have people who've served in wars. I have this really broad network of people from all these different experiences that I can say, does this seem fair to you? How does this, the George Floyd stuff, I went to my police officer friend in Bloomington and I'm like, how does this feel to you? How does this land on your ear? It seems like it's all right. It's okay. And so that's really important to me. Yes, I become frustrated. I turn on the news and I think it's hopeless. I also think, why would I believe that telling stories and taking pictures can make any sort of difference at all, given the gravity of the situation we live in? But maybe it's foolish to believe that it could, but maybe it's foolish to believe that it wouldn't. At the end of the day, I think that's my skill set. That's what I bring to the table. I've seen it encourage people. And I think sometimes people say about a piece of my mind, aren't you just preaching to the choir? And in some ways that's true. But when I was in Nebraska talking to the Farm Service Bureau right after the election in this really red state, that was not the choir. Those aren't people that are normally having some of these conversations, and they heard it too, and it opened up some really interesting conversations. But even if it were true, I think the choir needs encouragement too. Right? People who are trying to make a positive change in the world, that can be a really hard place to be. And if those people give up, then we're in a heap of trouble. And so part of a piece of my mind's job, I think, is to encourage change makers, to let people know that it's okay to keep having hope, to keep believing that something can shift, and to stay in the game. So when I get particularly discouraged, I make sure that I schedule another interview with somebody. Because when I'm sitting down talking with people who are doing good things, that's what gives me hope. Yeah.
Well, one of the exercises in listening that I have found the most difficult, and we do have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should be listening twice as much.
Right.
But I read this exercise and I thought, well, I'll try it. And that is that when someone asks you a question, count to 7 so that it's at least 5 to 7 seconds before you open your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is that hard to do?
It sure is. Sure is. But when you do it, is it helpful?
Oh, it was, and that was just the first day, and then you do that I think for 3 days, and then you can go down to 6 because you've trained your mind to pay attention to the
Okay.
and then you don't want to offend everybody that you talk to by
Everybody, no.
so it's a very interesting exercise, and I failed miserably. The first day was just awful, so I really haven't tried it since because it was not positive.
Not natural for you.
It was not. But
I have a friend who likes to say that we do best what we do most. So if it didn't work the first time, that's just because you haven't practiced it. But if you do it again, you might get a little better. If you've done it 20 times, it might start to feel natural.
And a second thing was that if you truly listen to someone for just 10 minutes, but you don't interrupt, you just truly listen to them, they'll start crying because nobody listens to people like they really are.
Interesting.
We get things that happen to us if we can just be quiet. And this,
I would say in 70% of these interviews, one or the other of us winds up in tears at some point, because I think that is a really powerful human experience to be heard that well. And when I interview people, I have 3 audiences always in mind. And the first is me, because I learned so much by paying attention and listening. The second is the person I'm interviewing, because I want them to feel seen and heard. I want them to feel whole at the end of this. And then the third is the bigger public, because if I'm going to learn something out of this, I figure somebody else maybe can too. So I always try to think of those 3 audiences. But during my interviews, my favorite questions really are just, what do you mean by that? And can you tell me more? Right? Because people will drop these little bits, they'll drop a little hint of something, and then they'll keep moving on. But if you're like, wait a minute, I want to hear more about that, then they'll start digging into the good stuff. So that's a learned process. So yeah.
Is there ever any talk of peace versus silence? Because silence is not necessarily peace. Just holding your tongue and not, countering the person who's giving you horrible vitriol is not the same.
It's not the same as peace. I mean, there is a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of conversation in some of these interviews, and certainly some of the people talk about peace, and other people talk about firm resistance to unjust behavior. I think there's room for all of that in there. The question for me sometimes is when someone's unleashing vitriol at you. If I throw some back at them, I doubt that it's going to move the needle. I doubt that it's going to move us towards any sort of understanding. A lot of times, sometimes in bigger audiences, in certain places, I'll get some pretty skeptical people who will be firing back some talking points at me, trying to poke holes in what I'm doing. I'm okay hearing that, and I would.
Hole in the picture.
Yeah, how do you poke holes in trying to respond to the integrity of each human being? I don't know. I mean, okay, so I'll give you an example. I was in West Virginia and a guy was looking at some of the George Floyd stuff. And at the end of it, he said, so I guess what you're saying is that all lives matter, which of course is a rebuttal to the notion of Black Lives Matter. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, all lives of course do matter, but I'm also not afraid to say Black Lives Matter. And he just kept pushing and he kept pushing on that one issue. And I said, here's the thing. Just because I say save the whales doesn't mean screw the dolphins.
Oh my God, I wrote that on Twitter once.
Oh, I said just because I'm wearing a little pink ribbon that says breast cancer awareness doesn't mean I don't care about your testicular cancer. I said all it means is there's just one other thing over here that needs some particular attention right now. And so I didn't say screw the dolphins. I used a stronger word than that. Oh, okay. What? And I don't usually get into it like that, but he was pushing hard on me, and I was not going to let that fly. And so I wasn't angry at him, but I'm like, here's my position. I said, we can debate that, but I think this is a thing that needs attention. So that's why I'm saying that. And so, yeah, it does not mean rolling over and letting people walk on you. It means rooting yourself in your values and trying to remain calm and responding with fact and integrity when you're pressed on it. It's hard to do because emotions come to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you, John, for coming to Wadena to present.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then I think I'm going to take that advice of waiting 7 seconds before a question.
That's a good practice.
Because then I don't come up with photography. Actually, I don't like that. Thank you. So this will conclude the stream. Are you going to stay for a few?
Stick around if anybody wants to visit. If anybody needs a book, I'll be here.
All right. So next month is Wendell Affield. He's a Bemidji author, memoirist. He's going to talk about the Vietnam War and his experiences there. That is going to be at the VFW banquet room. So it will not be here. It'll be in, and I would love to have that room filled. So I know last time I had an event at the VFW, we had 38 people. So he is going to talk about. He's got a lot of experiences, a lot of wisdom. And then October, I've just confirmed Janet Preuss. She will be here talking about. It's a novel. So it's a novelized version of events that actually happened in Ottertown County and close to the border here about corruption and burying evidence of crimes and murders. So this was 100 years ago, so she's going to talk about that.
What's it called?
It is called The 13th Crime. So it is true crime novelized. I think she had to novelize certain aspects to get it okayed by her publisher. November, it's not up there, but I'm going to have a poet. Her name is Leanne Bjorken, and she's going to be here with her poetry, and so it's a little spiritual, maybe a little spooky. So we're going to have her poems at Green Island on the poetry walk. So she's going to come. She's going to come in November on the second Saturday, and then I'm working to confirm other authors into the new year. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you online for watching, and again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
It was great having you here.
yeah, loved it. Thanks for all that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You take care. And have a good night.
Oh, I don't have them along, but it's
So, Ann, are you coming tomorrow?
Yes.
Because I'd really like to
I can still
see off of your conversation.